Recently, Airbnb and Brian Chesky made a claim that they plan on being the price leader again, competing with hotels. But what do we think about that? I personally think that it's impossible for Airbnb ever to lead on price against hotels, ever again. And there's a few reasons why. Airbnb fails to realize that they're pricing through us, the host, and we're the ones that ultimately set price in the market, and those days of cheap Airbnbs are just long gone. There is one way that they can compete on price, but it's a long shot. We're going to get into that in this video. Yes, I'm back from Burning Man. I survived. Let me tell you about that too. Welcome back, Airbnb family. So you've seen in the news lately that Airbnb guests are still upset about fees, that home prices are pulling back in a lot of markets. Rental markets are stabilizing in that way too, which is kind of cool for us arbitrage kids. One of our cracking Superos students actually just bragged on this a little bit, that he's making $1 million a year now with his arbitrage business after picking up his first property with us not too long ago. But him aside, there's still plenty of people in the public eye saying that this is really hard right now, don't jump in, stuff like that. People are losing money still, because there's still plenty of supply in a lot of markets and things just don't snap back into correction. So some markets have way too many Airbnbs, some markets are finding new opportunities. New York just shut that whole machine down. We're going to talk about that in a future video, and of course we're going to talk about the implications that it will have on Airbnb's entire business model if this becomes a trend. Let's get into why Airbnb cannot lead on price anymore. Airbnb doesn't set prices for markets. They can give guidance, but there's also other softwares that give guidance too, like Wheelhouse, AirDNA, Price Labs. There are tons out there that help hosts regulate prices between each other to make sure that everybody's meeting the market together, which is an important part of a pricing strategy for an entire industry. You see, when Airbnb was new, there's people who were overpriced, there's people who were grossly underpriced, and those grossly underpriced properties were great for Airbnb's brand, but it wasn't so good for the hosts. They probably were breaking even, they never thought they could make so much money, so people's log cabins were priced for super cheap because people just priced what they thought they should, not what the market could actually fetch. You see, here's the rub. Most hosts, when they're new, don't understand market forces, and when Airbnb was new, everybody was new. So this illusion of things being cheap on Airbnb was just because service providers did not know what they were doing. But everybody's wising up now, and people are starting to price more congruently. They're starting to price together with the thanks of things like software. And since Airbnb charges a service fee, somewhere around 14 or 15%, there's no way that they can clear the gap anymore, because the price difference back then was double or triple the savings compared to a hotel. Back when Airbnb was new, there were more customers that were enthusiastic to pay whatever the price was. You could take a property that's poorly furnished and charge a bunch of money for it, and people would stay in it because they were like, this is so cool, this is so trendy, I'm not staying in a hotel, I'm on Instagram showing you guys that I'm doing something new. Fortunately, properties still have that Instagram pop to it. And that's why I'm working on my bus. My bus has a wrap on both sides of the bus, happy to show you, that makes the place pretty on the outside. It's going to function like an Instagram wall for a house. When people are inside of a property and they want to take photos, they would sit down in front of a plant wall with an LED sign. Way cool stuff. In my case, people will be outside the bus in combination with whatever their destination is, taking photos of this way cool bus that they're staying in this way cool destination. Hence, the Instagram wall reincarnated into a bus wrap. So what I'm saying is we still have these opportunities. But again, Airbnb gets no part in what we price, and softwares are helping hosts drive their price. If the best Airbnb can do is cut some of their fees to make it more affordable, then even if Airbnb cut some of their service fees to make Airbnbs more affordable, then hosts would then increase their prices again, because what we hosts care about is what is our final price compared to our competition. And our main competition is hotels, meaning that the less fat that Airbnb takes, the more room there is for hosts to collect their margins. And a lot of hosts have felt a margin squeeze lately, so they're not going to be kind about it. If there's a single dollar that they can bleed back out of the system, they would bleed that dollar back out of the system. So the only way that Airbnb could actually do this is to charge some fat service fee and then give guests a rebate or something really silly like that. And that's not the long shot that I'm talking about, but that's just an example of forcing fat into a deal and giving it back to the customer as a rebate. But what that does, anytime that there's an inefficiency with a service provider like this, imagine Uber or Lyft, people can go to the other one. So there are already tons of hosts going to VRBO, doing direct bookings, doing all sorts of stuff that don't include Airbnb, because Airbnb is losing favor in the host community already. For example, they just dropped another change to their refund policy. Airbnb used to not charge you for cancellations as a host. If you had a cancellation that was considered a host cancellation, they might deduct your ranking so you don't show up as easily. They might temporarily block your listing if it was egregious enough, but they would never charge you money. About a year ago, they started charging you money, 10% of whatever the reservations cost was, up to a $1,000 cap. Well, they just removed that cap. This only really affects the largest properties. So those properties in Fort Lauderdale or Nashville or Santa Monica Pier, any places where you can charge, say, $30,000 a month for a reservation, if you cancel that reservation, Airbnb will charge you 10% up to that $30,000, and they'll keep $3,000 from you for that cancellation. Now, if the world was a fair place, and if Airbnb was a fair company, this might not seem so scary, but Airbnb is also known for canceling on your behalf as a host and giving you really no say to defend yourself. And they don't really have a good means for you to go about making an appeal for that. A lot of hosts have to find themselves in the arbitration process in order to get that money back. And so on that note, next month I will be doing an arbitration workshop. If you guys want to learn how the arbitration process works, I'm going to be tagging in an attorney, and we are going to go through the process of you filing arbitration claims against Airbnb the right way, so that way anytime that Airbnb does owe you money, like in a legitimate arbitration process, which is surprisingly way more money than I think you think it is, you can get that money back from them. And this is a process that every host needs to know now, because Airbnb has pushed so many resolution claims all the way to the back end saying, sorry, we're going to deny your claims, or air cover claims, they deny those, or they take your money for cancellations like this. There are so many reasons why you need to learn arbitration. So at this intersection, if Airbnb is just a service connection software that charges a little bit of fat to stay in the game, they have this balancing act. The more fat that they charge, which is their service fee, the more likely people like us are going to go to another service provider. Even though they provide us way cool things like the multi-calendar and stuff, we still will go to VRBO because we still want to be able to make all of our own money. It's our property, it's our money. If they charge less of a service fee, the market will still correct itself. The market will still charge more money because there's room to be charged. There will be a final price where an apartment goes for $200 and a hotel goes for $225, or the apartment goes for $200 and the hotel goes for $150. There's going to be truth in the market, and price discovery will always find those price points. So what does this mean for Airbnb? Well, they need a new product. Let's get into that product. Actually, let's get into Burning Man, why I braided my hair. So I kind of got trapped at Burning Man. I was there for 2 weeks, and yes, it did rain and it flooded, and a lot of people got stuck, and a lot of people cried. And I'll tell you, as an Airbnb host, this is why it could be important for you guys. I went to Burning Man this year myself because I like challenges as a business owner. When I first built this business, it was off the back end of a failing industry. I was in the newspaper industry, and I built sales teams that sold newspaper subscriptions, and then I built this business around some apartments that my employees for that company were staying at, and we grew and we grew and we grew. And over the last 2 years, I've lived a pretty soft life. Life has been pretty easy, and I fell in love with Burning Man last year for the community, but I realized it's one of those places that you can go do big stuff in a really strange environment. So I ran the kitchen for about 104 people. Our camp was 104 people. I bought this massive circus tent. I showed up for to build the tent and build the kitchen. I stayed for the whole event. People leaving was delayed, of course, because of the rain, and then I stayed to strike or to tear everything down. Total of 2 weeks. Now, when the rain hit and people were freaking out, I felt needed. I really came to life. I felt like this is where I need to be right now. I need to help give some leadership, keep people's heads on straight, make sure that everyone's accommodated. I had to pump a little lake of water out of our tent because we housed so many people during the rainstorm that the floor started to sink, like the dirt that became mud started to sink. And by the next day, we had lakes of water inside this 75-foot circus tent. So we pulled our sump pump from the gray water system and just started to exhume all this water and get out of the tent to try to dry our tent environment just in case another rainstorm came, which it did. Of course it did. But over that week, I cooked thousands of meals for people. And there's a lot of people who needed guidance and help and leadership. And I even went like super viral on TikTok for a series of videos about the Burning Man situation. And you'd be surprised how many people don't like Burning Man. They think it's all for like 1%ers or people that do drugs or whatever. But in my world, no drugs. Just waking up at 7:30 in the morning, having my morning coffee. You guys, I guess that counts as a drug. And then making food for people. And that was my Burning Man. And I feel so blessed to have had that wild experience. So of course now I'm back finishing the bus. We're going to be adding some properties. I'm going to be picking up some new projects, of course doing some new webinars, doing some travel, hopefully doing some small group stuff with you guys. What Burning Man taught me was to love working insanely hard again. I don't think I've worked insanely hard in a couple of years. And maybe it's bringing that back. So happy to be back. Okay, now Airbnb's long shot product, their long shot chance at being a price competitor. They are pushing rooms. We talked about this before. Rooms is where you break up a house into individual listings per the room. So if you have a 5-bedroom house, you can sell that whole 5-bedroom house for maybe $600 to $1,000 a night. But if you can't fetch that premium price for the whole thing, you can have 5 different listings broken up by the room, and you can sell those rooms for $60 to $110 a night. Of course, depending on where you are, quality of the property, stuff like that. What this will do is this will allow somebody to stay in a bedroom, have access to the kitchen or living room or whatever other shared amenities the host decides, and then they can get a quality stay, quality bed, quality kitchen, whatever, kind of a hybrid product there for cheaper than a hotel, because the homeowner or the home arbitrager, either way, that house can still make more money last minute on their leftover days by the room than they would make on the entire place. Because if you follow pricing strategy, the way that this works is groups book far in advance, right? So if somebody's going to spend $600 or $1,000 a night on a house, they're likely booking 2 months or 3 months in advance for a group. But all those groups that plan ahead already have booked, and homes that get left behind. Let's say there's a home with inventory available next week. It's not going to get the same kind of group or a group at all booking next week. When do you know a group of 8 booking 5 days notice, right? That doesn't really happen very often. So what a home has to do is drop their prices to get a group of 4 or 5 or 3 to book the same house that a group of 10 could book, you know? And in this case, a group of 3 or 4 won't spend the same amount of money that a group of 10 would spend. So they have to drop their prices. Now, Airbnb pushing rooms as this big new thing, or this big new again thing, would give the homeowner a shot to list all these bedrooms individually. And now where a group of 3 or 4 might spend $300 per night on the same house, you could charge 5 different groups of 1 and 2 per bedroom, $75. Now 75 times 5 is like $375, I think, which is already more. If you got more than that, you can collect more. If you had more bedrooms, you can collect more. Airbnb is hoping that making rooms cool again is going to be what allows them to compete against hotels. But now the reason why this is a long shot is really nice properties tend to get booked. Properties that aren't getting booked aren't so nice. And the properties that aren't so nice, the reason why is because hosts aren't really doing the homework. They're really not adhering to best practices. So what will have happen is we'll have hosts that still don't know enough about the industry try and then give up. Those properties could disappear. The good properties will stick around and get mostly booked, and those homeowners that are doing well enough on entire homestays, they're not going to be ambitious enough to try a whole new business model just to pick up bookings on the other 4, 5, or 7 days a month that they're missing. They'll rather just price high and go empty those other 7 days. This is actually a debate in the industry, which is whether it's worth to really grind out the last 7 days of occupancy, or should you just expect to be empty 20% of the time. And a lot of hosts will tell you that for their luxury properties, they'll rather be empty that 20% of the time because turnovers are work. Turnovers are risky. People can break stuff. People are at a higher risk of breaking stuff at half the price than they are at full price. So risk management would say, let it go empty. Now, for those of us who are gluttons for efficiency and maximizing revenue, I like the idea of doing rooms, but it is a different business model. The way that you run your housekeeping staff is going to be different. The way that you run check-ins and check-outs will be different. Your guest issues will be different. And so for that reason, if you want to do rooms and capture a new market, you'll have to be open-minded to what that means for you. Airbnb's also made some other changes where you have to use your face and your name instead of a company logo as a host. You have to tell more about yourself as a host, blah, blah, blah. There's a list of things that you have to do to qualify for Airbnb rooms. This means that Airbnb's greatest challenges for this project will be adoption and quality of product. And then also guests have to adopt this as well. Guests have to choose rooms instead of entire places. The market could just reject the whole thing, possibly. I don't think that that's going to be true. Airbnb has enough data to know that people are choosing rooms. We don't get to see exactly what the data is. They might choose to share it with us one day, but these are going to be the things that I think matter. Another thing that Airbnb might do in order to try to become a price competitor again with hotels is they could force us all into simplified pricing. Hopefully this doesn't exactly happen, but I don't know. I think it's coming. I just have this gut feeling that Airbnb is going to force simplified pricing on everybody, which means we're all going to have to redo the way that we do price, because how prices go up and down and change and what the final collect is for us will be much more like Booking.com. And you know how much we love Booking.com, right? Exactly. So I think this is going to fail as far as being a cheap alternative to hotels. I think that Airbnb needs to embrace that they're not a cheap alternative to hotels, and they just need to do a better job at what they're supposed to be doing. And us hosts, we're part of that too, right? Because I just said that Airbnb can't change the prices for us and force us to be cheaper than hotels, because we ultimately determine our price and our product. And in that same breath, then, we are in charge of our product. If we want to do good as hosts, we need to provide a good product to the customer and good service, so that way they choose Airbnbs instead of hotels. That's on us too. So future videos, I'm going to show you guys some really cool design hacks, some stuff that makes your place really cool on the cheap. Not necessarily super cheap, because nothing good comes free or cheap, but way cheaper than you think, making an awesome place. In future videos, I'm going to be showing you guys some design hacks, how you can make your place super cool looking on the cheap, so that way you can provide one of those quality products without breaking the bank. I've learned a lot in my travels lately, and I'm in Las Vegas again, post Burning Man, and even just walking around some of these casinos and looking at how they use lighting and texture and plants to create these looks that are just magnificent, but when you look at it closely, you go, oh, that makes total sense. I could recreate that. I could do that. So I'm going to show you some stuff to do with lighting, plants, walls, textures. It's going to be fun, and we're going to help you make your Airbnbs pop, Vegas style, or Tulum style, or anywhere else style that you like. Thank you so much for watching this video. In the description, you'll find links for an Airbnb rooms workshop. I'm going to be teaching how to do Airbnb rooms as a different business model altogether, how to run your teams and stuff like that. That's going to be in the description below. And that arbitration workshop where you can ask Airbnb for all that money that they owe you, putting that down there too, so that way next month you can tune in. Both of those will have replays that will be available. But if you attend, you can also ask questions, because we do Q&A at the end of all of my workshops. So grab your tickets down there. I'll see you on those. And as always, guys, I'll see you on the other side.